Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Today is March 12th, 1977, Saturday. We are present at the home of
Reverend Jasper Charles Massegee.
the Reverend Jasper Charles Massegee. Would you spell his last name, please?
Massegee, Senior.
All right, let me run this back to make sure that it's recording properly. Present is Staff Counsel Howard M. Gilbert from the Select Committee on Assassinations and investigator Jack Moriarty, and we have been speaking to Mrs. Beverly Massegee. Is that right, Mrs. Massegee?
Yes.
It is now 1:18 p.m. and we have been speaking together perhaps for a half an hour. Is that approximately correct?
That's correct.
All right. Now we have a tape recorder on, and you can see that. Is that right? And we've asked you for your permission to record a summary of our conversation, and you have given us that permission. Is that correct?
Yes, I have.
All right. Now, what was your maiden name, Mrs. Massegee?
Beverly June Oliver.
And would you spell your your maiden name?
Oliver.
And you have been married once previously to your present marriage, is that correct?
Yes.
And to who was that?
George Albert McGann, MC, capital G-A-N-N.
And in what year were you married to Mr. McGann?
1966.
All right. And Mr. McGann was murdered while you were still married to him, is that correct? And you recall the year that occurred?
September 1970 or 71.
And when did you marry your present husband? The year will be?
That's what I'm trying to think of. 5 years ago.
1972?
Yeah.
And what is your present husband's name?
Jasper Charles Massegee, Jr.
And what is your present home address?
Box 188, Strawn, S-T-R-A-W-N, Texas.
And what phone number can you be reached at?
Area code 214-742-1571. That's a 24-hour answering service.
All right. And your husband is an evangelist, is that correct? And you work with him in his calling?
Yes. And
you travel a great deal in that work?
32 to 35 weeks a year.
We would be able to locate you, though, through your answering service?
24 hours a day.
And could you give us the name of your father-in-law and his address and phone number?
My father-in-law is Jasper Charles Massegee, Sr., Box 110, Copeville, C-O-P-E-V-I-L-L-E, Texas. The phone number is area code 214-853-4273.
And we would be able to locate you, hopefully, through your father-in-law also. Is that correct?
You'd have more success through the answering service.
One or the other should.
Yeah.
All right. Now, by the way, when we began our discussions here with you, we in no way threatened you or promised you anything, did we?
No.
We identified ourselves as being employees of the House of Representatives?
Yes, with pictured identification cards.
All right. Now, Mrs. Massegee, when you, if we go back in time prior to your marriage, did you have occasion to work as an employee in a nightclub?
Yes, I did.
And what was your capacity there?
I was a singer.
And what was the name of the owner of the club?
Abe Weinstein.
Is that W-I-N-E-S-T?
No, W-E-I-N-S-T-I-N-E.
All right. And what was the name of that club?
The Colony Club.
And where was it located? In what city?
Dallas, Texas.
And
on Commerce Street.
And how far was it from the Carousel Club that was run by Jack Ruby?
There was a parking lot between the two clubs.
Now, were you familiar with Jack Ruby?
Yes, I knew Jack Ruby.
Well, had you ever had a drink with him?
Yes, on several occasions.
How did you become familiar with him?
Well, he owned the club next door, and everybody knew everybody. We'd just go back and forth between clubs. I just became acquainted with him as the guy that owned the club next door.
You were what, 16 or 17 years old?
16.
And at that time, your employment in the club was limited to what?
It wasn't limited.
You were a singer, weren't you?
Yeah.
Did you participate in the stripping at all?
No, I didn't.
All right. Now, at one point in time, did you have occasion to go to the Carousel Club and observe Jack Ruby at a table?
Yes.
And how did this come about?
Well, I went over between shows, between my second and third show. It was on like a Tuesday or Wednesday night, a slow night, so there wasn't anybody in either club. And I just went over to visit.
To the Carousel Club?
To the Carousel Club.
And where was Ruby located?
He was sitting at a table.
And was he alone?
No.
And who was with him at the table?
To the best of my memory, there was a man and Jada, a stripper.
Now you say the word Jada. Is that spelled G as in George, A?
No, it's spelled J as in Jane, A, D as in dog, A.
All right. Do you know her real name?
No, I don't.
Do you recall the color of her hair?
Red.
And was she a stripper?
Yes, she was the star stripper there.
Was she headlined in Ruby's club at that time?
Yes.
Approximately how long before the assassination did this take place?
About 2 weeks.
All
To
right.
the best of my memory, 2 weeks, 10 days, 3 weeks, somewhere. It wasn't any more than that.
All right. Jada was at the table with Ruby, and who else was there?
Another man that was introduced to me as Lee Oswald.
Now, who did the introduction?
Jack Ruby.
Was there anybody else at the table?
To the best of my memory, Andrew, the bartender manager.
Andrew would be A-N-D-R-E-W.
Uh-huh.
That was his first name?
Yes.
And what race was he?
Negroid.
You recall his approximate height? Was he short, medium, or tall?
About 5'2".
He was short?
And thin.
What was his approximate age at that time?
I would say between 25 and 30.
All right. Now, when Ruby introduced you to a man by the name of Lee Oswald, did you get a good look at Oswald's face?
Yes, I did.
Approximately how far from Oswald were you?
Across the table.
Within touching this arm's distance? Did
Yeah.
you reach out and touch him?
Yeah.
How was the lighting at that time?
Well, the table was fairly between the bar and the stage. And the stage lights were always on, so I always thought it was fairly good. Not like in a house, but not real dark like.
Did you have any trouble seeing the features of any of the people at the table?
No.
All right. Approximately how long did you remain at the table?
Just long enough to have a drink. I'd say probably 20 minutes.
All right. And during that time, did Andrew, Ruby, and the man introduced as Oswald all remain at the table with you?
No, Andrew went over and mixed the drinks, then brought the drinks, and then I don't know what he did. He just went on about his business.
Did Oswald remain at the table during
Yes.
that time? Did Jada
Yes.
and Ruby?
Uh-huh.
Now, what, if anything, did Ruby say about Oswald, for example, who he was employed by?
Well, whenever he introduced him, he said, "This is Lee Oswald, and he's with the CIA," which didn't register anything with me because I was just a stupid 17, 16-year-old kid.
You didn't know what CIA meant,
No.
but you have a recollection that he did use the initials CIA.
Yeah, because in my mind, I was trying to figure out what it was, but I wasn't going to show my ignorance by asking. So
I see. So you paid particular attention to it because you were trying to figure out what the initials meant? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and he didn't really look like a typical businessman, and I didn't know what it was, so I just stuck in my mind.
All right. Now, when was the next time after this evening that Oswald was drawn to your attention?
When he was shot in the basement of the Dallas Police Department
By who?
by Ruby.
Now, did you see some photos of that?
I saw the film
Was it shown on...
on television.
Were you able to see Oswald's face at that
Yes.
time? Did you also see pictures of Oswald that had been reproduced in the local newspapers upon the killing of President Kennedy?
I'm sure I did. I don't.
Was there any... Did you make any connection of any type at the time that you observed the film of Oswald being shot
I think the first time that I formed the opinion in my mind that that was the same man that I met in the club was, or when it first registered in my mind, was whenever he came out. And to me, it looked like he looked at Ruby and grinned as though he expected Ruby to take him out of there.
Now, was there any question in your mind at the time that you saw the film as to whether or not Oswald was the same man who had been introduced to you some 2 weeks prior by Ruby?
No.
You were positive it was the same man?
I would say I was positive, yeah.
All right. Now, did you ever tell this to any official agency at the time? FBI, CIA, Secret Service, Police Department, Sheriff's Department?
No, I did not.
And why is that?
Because I was scared.
And why were you scared?
Because by that time, even a stupid 17-year-old kid could put together a few things that wasn't adding up to be 4.
But what do you mean by that?
Well, Jada had disappeared for one thing.
All right, now let's stop a moment. Now, Jada was the red-headed stripper that was at the table with Ruby and Oswald.
Yes, and she was the first person to ever come out and admit having had met Oswald 2 or 3 weeks prior to the assassination in the club with Ruby.
And how did you get this information that Jada had made the statement?
It was in the Dallas Morning News and the Dallas Times-Herald.
All right. And after that came out in the newspaper, did you ever see Jada again?
Never. Not to this day.
Do you have any idea what happened to her? Or do you know what happened to her?
I don't know what happened to her, but I know that no one has seen her, if any of our friends have heard of her or know anything about her.
All right. Now, sometime after Ruby killed Oswald, did you have a conversation with Andrew about Jada or anything belonging to Jada?
Yes, I don't remember the exact time lapse, but it was after Oswald had been shot and Jada had disappeared that I went over to the club. I can't remember who was with me. There was 1 or 2 other girls with me, and we went over, I guess, just out of curiosity to find out what they were going to do with the club. And Andrew came out with a G-string and a bra belonging to Jada of her costume and wanted to know if we wanted to buy it. And
did Andrew say why he was trying to sell?
He said that Jada had left and had asked him to dispose of her wardrobe for him, that she was retiring or something. I don't remember what the excuse was, but I just told him I didn't have any use for it. I wasn't a stripper.
Do you know Andrew's last name?
I have no idea.
Do you know any relatives that he may have had in the Dallas area?
I don't know anything about him at all.
All right. Now, on the day of the assassination and the time of the assassination, where were you?
In Dewey Plaza,
And what were you doing there?
taking pictures.
And what were you wearing on or about your head?
A headscarf.
All right. Now, do you recall what part of Dealey Plaza you were on at the time you were taking those photos?
I was right across from the white fence, kind of,
Were you
I
on
guess
the
halfway.
grass?
I was on the grass.
Were you on the same side of the park that the Texas School Book Depository
No,
was
I
on?
was across the street.
All right. And what were you taking photographs of?
Of the people and of the president when he came down the road. And
What type of camera did you have?
a Yashica movie camera with 60-foot zooms lens.
Now, was this a new camera or an old camera?
It was a new camera.
All right. And what were you focusing on at the time that you heard the gunshots?
The car, President Kennedy.
So you were actually taking pictures
Yes.
of Kennedy at the time he was shot?
Yes.
All right. Now, Kennedy was shot on a Friday. Can you tell us what happened to the film and the camera?
Okay, to the best of my memory, I don't know for sure if our club was closed for 1 day or 2 days, but it seems like it was closed Friday night and Saturday night, and we opened back up on Sunday. And our club was upstairs. It had 2 flights of stairs. You walked up a few steps, and then there was a little platform thing, and then you walked up another flight of stairs when you entered into the club, and there was 2 men waiting there on that platform. And when I got up there, they asked me if I was Beverly Oliver, and I said, yes, I am. And they showed me some cards and introduced themselves. I don't remember their names, but they said they were from the FBI and the CIA. And that stuck in my mind because I knew what the FBI was, but there was that CIA again.
So this was the second time you'd heard CIA within
Yeah.
a couple of weeks?
Yeah.
All right.
And they asked me if I had been down there taking pictures of the assassination, and I said yes. And they said, where are they? And I said, I have them here in my makeup kit. I always carried a makeup kit with me with my makeup in it, and I, at that time, as most always still now, carry a camera with me. And they said that they would like to take the film, develop them, view them, and then they would see that I got them back.
And was it ever returned to you?
No, it wasn't.
I'm going to turn this off just for a second, okay? Mrs. Massegee, while the tape recorder was off, I showed you a picture from the book cover-up at page 53, which was supposedly a photo of the babushka lady that Mr. Shaw refers to in his book. And I asked you whether or not you were able to identify that photo as being of yourself, and you indicated you couldn't be sure either way.
No,
Is that correct?
I can't.
Right. The scarf that woman is wearing in the photograph, is that, how would you describe that? Is that similar or not similar to the attire that you were wearing at that time?
It's very similar, yes it is.
Now, the photograph seems to show, or appears to show, that the woman is dark-haired. At that time, what color was your hair?
My hair was blonde, real white blonde, but I very often wore wigs of different colors.
You had dark wigs.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So, you have read the areas in cover-up referring to the babushka lady, is that correct? Mr. Shaw has interviewed you?
Yeah.
All right. Now, except for being unable to positively say one way or the other that the photograph is you or is not you, the description of the placement of the person who was taking the photographs, the form of dress, does that coincide with your recollection
Yes,
of what
it
you were
does.
doing? Now, were you
Yes.
taken out to Dealey Plaza by Mr. Shaw and a Penn Jones?
Mr. Shaw and somebody, but I don't remember what his name was.
And did you show them where you were when you were taking the photos?
Yes.
All right. And you have never seen the developed film that was given to the two men who represented themselves to be FBI and CIA?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Now, you mentioned during our conversation somebody by the name of a Chris, C-H-R-I-S, Colt, C-O-L-T, whose true name at that time was Rada, R-A-D-A, Adker, A-D-K-E-R.
Rada Adker.
Adker, did I spell it correctly?
As far as I know, I don't really know how to spell it.
What relationship did that woman have to these events?
Well, a few days later, after the assassination and after Ruby shot Oswald, there was a lot of magazines coming up and wanting to interview all the showgirls, and Time magazine came up and was waiting at the head of the stairs for the girls as we got there to go to work that night, and they would try to interview us, and they asked me as I walked in if I knew Ruby or knew of any of the events that had happened prior, and I told them that I would not know Ruby if I saw him on the street.
Now, did you lie to Time magazine?
Yes, I did.
And the reason that you lied to Time magazine was what?
Well, because I felt like if whatever had happened, which I was a 17-year-old kid, I didn't know what had happened, and I was smart enough to be scared enough not to want to get involved in it, and I still don't want to be involved in it.
In other words, you lied to Time magazine because you did not want to be identified as someone who had any knowledge
That's right.
of the assassination or of Ruby or Oswald.
That's right.
All right. Now, what did this girl, Chris Colt, did she?
She gave them an interview, to the best of my knowledge that I can remember. She gave Time magazine an interview. I don't know if they ever printed it or anything, but she talked to them. And that night, she had heard me tell him that I didn't know Ruby, and she asked me why didn't I want to cash in on all that free publicity. And I told her, I said, well, if whoever killed the President of the United States could kill him and get away with it, they could kill a two-bit showgirl and never make the back page of the paper.
Did this girl, Chris Colt, have any personal knowledge of any relationship between Ruby and Oswald that you know of?
I don't know.
In Mr. Shaw's book, he states that a stripper by the name of Kathy Kay had told co-workers at the Carousel that she had in fact danced with Oswald at the club sometime prior to the assassination. Now, did you know Kathy Kay?
Yes, I did.
Had you ever heard her make any statements of that nature?
No, I didn't, because I haven't seen her since it happened.
Was that her true name, Kathy Kay?
No, I don't think so.
Do you know what her true name was?
I can't remember. It seems like she was a German girl. She had a faint. I don't remember.
All right. Mr. Moriarty, is there anything that you would like to ask?
No, I just want to make sure that this was Ruby that she said she didn't know, not Oswald, when you were talking to these news people.
They didn't ask me anything about Oswald. They just asked me about Ruby, and I said I did not know him.
I just want to clarify that one point, that's all I have.
But in fact, you did know Jack Ruby and had known
Yes.
him since you started to work.
Yes.
Is that correct? All right. Now, I had also asked you earlier that upon proper documentation, and of course the government providing the transportation and that there would be no loss to you or no expenses out of pocket to you, you would be willing, if called upon, to testify before a congressional committee. Not happy to, but you would respond as a citizen. Is that correct?
I would have to, I guess.
You would not want to do that, though?
I wouldn't want to, no.
All right. And your husband has just come into the room, is that correct?
Yes.
And it was with his permission and knowledge that we began talking with you earlier today. Is that
Yes.
correct? All right. It is now 1:39 in the afternoon on Saturday, March 12th, 1977. It's at this time I'm going to terminate the interview unless there is anything else that you would like to add by way of clarification.
No, it's all correct.
All right, thank you very much. This terminates the interview.
I think we overstayed our leave on